You were gonna live on the moon. You believed that with everything you had. You watched the rockets on your family's black and white television, you memorized the astronauts' names, and somewhere between 1966 and 1969, you held a 6-inch rubber man in a white space suit, and you knew, the way only a child can know, that the future he represented was coming for you. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. His name was Major Matt Mason, and if you grew up during the space race, he wasn't just a toy, he was a promise. He showed up in 1966, right when America needed him most. The country was divided, Vietnam was tearing families apart. But every evening, between all the bad news, there was this other thing, this incredible, unifying thing happening above the clouds. NASA was sending men into orbit. The whole nation held its breath during every launch. And every boy watching those grainy black and white liftoffs decided the same thing at the same time. I want to go up there. That's where Matt Mason came in. He wasn't a soldier, he wasn't a superhero. He was an explorer. An astronaut who lived and worked on the moon, and his spacesuit wasn't something a toy designer dreamed up over lunch. It was a near-exact replica of a real prototype, the Aerojet Lunar Exploration spacesuit that had appeared on the cover of Life magazine in April 1962. The engineers who designed his equipment weren't toy people, they were former aerospace engineers. One of them was the son of the man who founded Northrop, the company that builds fighter jets. These men had worked on real rockets and real missiles, and now they were building a rubber astronaut for your Christmas stocking, and they built him right. Matt Mason was about 6 inches tall, half the size of G.I. Joe, made of rubber over a wire frame with accordion joints at every bend, knees, hips, shoulders, elbows, so you could pose him any way you wanted. He could crouch, he could reach, he could float. He felt like a real astronaut in miniature, and that mattered more than size ever could. But here's what made him unforgettable. It wasn't just the figure, it was the world that came with him. There was a 3-story space station, a moon base that opened up and had rooms and equipment and a place for everything. There was the space crawler, a battery-powered vehicle that climbed over anything you put in its path. The Unitread space hauler, the space bubble, a jetpack, a satellite launcher, a reconnaissance sled, every single piece designed to look like it had come straight from NASA's drawing board, because most of it actually had. You could spend a whole Christmas morning just opening the boxes, and a whole winter building a world on your bedroom floor that felt as real as anything Cape Canaveral was doing on television. And the crew. Matt Mason had Sergeant Storm in his red suit, Doug Davis, and Jeff Long, a black astronaut added to the team in 1968 at a time when every single real astronaut at NASA was white. A toy company imagined a future more inclusive than the one the government was willing to build. A lot of boys never thought twice about Jeff Long being part of the crew. He just belonged. And that quiet, simple fact might be one of the most beautiful things about the whole line. Then there were the aliens, Captain Laser, the tall, mysterious one, Callisto from Jupiter, with a transparent head so you could see his alien brain, and Scorpio, an insect creature with battery-powered flashing eyes that spooked more than one 3-year-old on Christmas morning. You saved your allowance for the next accessory. You circled things in the Sears catalog months before Christmas and left it open on the kitchen table where your parents would see it. You negotiated, you begged, you were so good for so many weeks that your mother started to wonder what was wrong with you. And when Christmas morning came and you tore the paper off that enormous box and saw the space station, the 3-story moon base with the ladder and the compartments and the little sink, the sound you made wasn't a word. It was something deeper than language. It was pure, unfiltered joy. You brought your Matt Mason to school for show and tell and watched the other kids' eyes go wide. One man described that exact moment being in kindergarten in 1967, watching a classmate bring in his space station for the whole class and feeling a jealousy so deep it stayed with him for 50 years. If you were the kid who had it, you knew. You were the kid everyone wanted to come play at your house. Your bedroom floor was the moon, and everyone wanted a ticket. Because Matt Mason wasn't just a toy you played with. He was a toy you lived inside. You built moon missions on your bedroom carpet. You crawled the space crawler across the backyard dirt and pretended it was lunar dust. You made sound effects with your mouth because the moon had no air. You propped the space station against the wall and imagined it was anchored to the Sea of Tranquility. You spent entire Saturday afternoons on the floor, alone or with your brother, lost so completely in that world that your mother had to call you 3 times before you heard her. Your brother had Sergeant Storm. You had the Major. Together, you were a crew. And there was a detail that every boy who owned one remembers, a detail so small it shouldn't matter, but it does. The way the rubber smelled. That faint chemical scent of plastisol, the same material Mattel used in their Thing Maker. You would hold Matt Mason close to your face to position his arms just right, and you would breathe it in without thinking. 50 years later, that smell is gone, but the memory of it is still there, lodged somewhere between the brain and the heart, in the place where childhood lives. And the beautiful thing, the thing that made it more than just play, was that you believed it was real. Not the toy, the future. You believed that by the time you were old enough, there would be moon stations, there would be space crawlers on the lunar surface, there would be men, maybe you, living and working up there just like Major Matt Mason. A journalist at the Washington Post put it perfectly years later, "Because I was an Apollo baby." The Major represented the idealism of childhood and American can-do-ism. If we put a man on the moon in 1969, surely Major Matt's moon station would be a likelihood within a few years. That was not fantasy. That was the reasonable expectation of every boy watching those rockets climb into the sky. If you grew up in Houston, the space program was in the air you breathed. One man wrote that he had the moon crawler, the moon base, and several figures, and that it was the in thing because in his neighborhood, everyone's dad worked at NASA or knew someone who did. But you did not have to live in Houston to feel it. You felt it in Ohio and in Florida and in every small town with a television set. The moon was step 1. Mars was next, the future was coming, and it was going to look exactly like the floor of your bedroom. One man put it more bluntly, decades later. The Apollo program lost in space, and toys like Major Matt Mason led me to believe my future would be filled with Pan Am flights to the moon and astronauts on other planets. Instead, I got a future of gas lines, terrorism, climate change, and free internet porn. He was joking, but only halfway. And then on July 20th, 1969, it happened. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon. America won the race. The whole world watched. And that was exactly the moment the dream began to die. It's one of the strangest things in toy history. The event that Major Matt Mason had been building toward, the moon landing, was the very thing that destroyed him. Because once America got to the moon, the country simply lost interest. The politicians stopped funding it. NASA scrapped the last 2 planned moon landings. The public turned to other things. The space race was over, and winning it somehow made it boring. And there was Major Matt Mason still on the shelf, still promising a future on the moon, except now, nobody was going anymore. Then came the final blow. In December 1969, a dock strike made the entire Matt Mason line unavailable for Christmas. The most important selling season of the year, gone. By the time the strike ended, the momentum was gone too. Mattel looked at the numbers, looked at the culture, and quietly pulled the plug. By 1970, Major Matt Mason was done, canceled at the very height of production, which means the last toys they made are the rarest and most expensive because they barely had time to reach the stores before the whole line disappeared. The wireframe figures had always been fragile. The metal inside would break at the elbows and knees from too much bending, from too much love, really, because the boys who broke their Matt Masons broke them by playing with them every single day. By the time most boys outgrew them, their astronaut had one working arm, or a leg that dangled loose, or a head that tilted at an angle that no real astronaut would survive. You kept playing anyway. A one-armed astronaut was still an astronaut. You found ways to make it work because you weren't ready to let him go. And when the figures broke beyond repair, there were no new ones coming. Your moon base went quiet. The space crawler stopped crawling. The batteries ran out and nobody bought new ones. And one day your mother put it all in a box during spring cleaning. Or it got left behind in a move. Or it ended up at a yard sale for $0.25. And that was the last you ever saw of it. You didn't know it at the time, but you had just said goodbye to something you'd never be able to get back, not the toy, but the feeling of believing the future belonged to you. Major Matt Mason was never brought back. Not a reissue, not a 50th anniversary set, not a reboot. In all of toy history, he is one of the very few popular lines that simply vanished and stayed vanished. The man who was supposed to lead boys to the moon quietly disappeared from the Earth. Tom Hanks, who starred in Apollo 13 and who produced From the Earth to the Moon for HBO, once called Major Matt Mason his favorite toy as a child. He described him as a great astronaut, a full-on, lifelike astronaut, made with rubber and wire, kind of like Gumby. He was 13 years old when Apollo 11 landed. He was exactly the boy this toy was built for, a kid who watched the rockets on television and believed every word of the promise. He has been trying to make a Major Matt Mason movie for over a decade. It has not happened yet. Maybe it will. Maybe it will not. But the fact that one of the most famous men in Hollywood, a man who has played astronauts and won Academy Awards, still thinks about a rubber astronaut he played with as a boy tells you everything about what that toy meant, and he is not alone. Men all over the country still think about their Matt Mason. One wrote that he still has his original figure, broken arms and all, sitting in a curio cabinet. Another said he thinks about his space station all the time. Another wrote 6 words that say more than any paragraph could. I wanted it so bad you cannot believe. And then he added, thanks, Dad. 50 years later, thanks, Dad. This was no mere toy. That's what happened to Major Matt Mason. He didn't fail. He wasn't beaten by a competitor. He was a casualty of success, the only toy in history killed by the very achievement it celebrated. The moon landing was America's greatest triumph, and it was Major Matt Mason's death sentence. The boy who played with him on the floor believed the future was coming. The man he became knows it never arrived. We got to the moon, and then we stopped going. But the boy who held that little rubber astronaut and bent his wire arms toward the stars, that boy is still in there somewhere, still remembering the weight of the space crawler in his hands, still hearing the click of the satellite launcher, still smelling that faint rubber scent of plastisol, still believing, just for a second when he looks up at the night sky, that the moon was close enough to touch. If you ever had a Major Matt Mason, tell us, did you get the space station? Or was it the one thing you never stopped wanting?